At 3:14 a.m., the smoke alarm in the upstairs hallway chirped once. That's what woke me up. Not her. Not a message. Not the click of her keys in the door, or the thud of her heels on the hardwood, or the usual rustle of her dumping her bag at the foot of the bed and sighing like she had endured something. No, it was a dead battery in the smoke detector that reminded me I lived here alone now. Not legally, not officially, but practically. And the strangest part? I didn't even panic when I remembered she wasn't in bed. My first thought wasn't, what if she's hurt? It was, well, at least she can't wake me up yelling tonight. That should have told me everything. But you probably want to know what happened. Why my wife, Phoebe, a woman who once cried watching me read my wedding vows, decided to RSVP yes to her ex-boyfriend's house party and pack an overnight bag like she was headed to a cabin in Aspen. I could give you the build-up, the slow decline, the stupid fights over toothpaste brands and towels on the floor. But that's not where the fracture happened. The fracture happened the night she told me, dead serious. I need to remind you that I have options. She said that while brushing her hair, like she was commenting on the weather. I laughed, not because it was funny, because I was too stunned to respond with anything adult. And the worst part? She didn't take it back. Didn't say it was a joke. Just kept brushing. The party invite came 2 days later. Just a fun thing with old college friends, she said. Josh is hosting. You remember Josh, right? Of course I remember Josh. He was her passion mistake. The kind of ex you never talk about in detail unless you want your current husband to wake up with ulcers. When I asked why she had to stay overnight, she tilted her head and said, "So you don't trust me now?" And there it was. The trap. Say no, and I'm controlling. Say yes, and I'm a spineless doormat. So I did neither. I just nodded and said, "Do whatever you want." She smiled like I handed her the keys to a kingdom. And then she did exactly that. She left that Saturday in a cherry red coat she hadn't worn in years, lipstick brighter than usual, perfume thick enough to follow her out the door like a ghost. She didn't text me that night, didn't check in, didn't lie. She just disappeared, until she returned, and found everything had changed, starting with the locks. At 7:41 a.m., I heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. It wasn't the soft hum of her usual parking. It was fast, aggressive, the kind of stop that made gravel crunch like bones. I didn't move. I just stood there in the kitchen, sipping cold coffee from the same mug I'd used the night before, the one that said "best husband ever" in faded letters. A knock, then another, then pounding. She didn't have a key anymore. I had changed the locks. But I didn't do it out of spite. I did it because I had to. See, after she left the night before, I didn't rage. I didn't drink. I didn't spiral. I cleaned. I organized every drawer in the kitchen. I folded all the laundry. I even vacuumed under the bed, which is where I found an old movie ticket stub from 2 months ago. A movie I never saw. A date I never knew happened. And that was when something in me shut off. Just, click, gone. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't even ask why. Instead, I booked a storage unit online. I called a locksmith. I opened a new bank account. By 3 a.m., I had everything of value packed in the trunk of my car. Photos, documents, my laptop, even the stupid bonsai tree I'd been keeping alive for 5 years. I left her clothes, her shoes, her skincare army that took up 80% of the bathroom. She could have all that. But not me. Not anymore. Now she was outside, knocking like the house owed her something. I opened the door slowly, not out of hesitation, but because I wanted her to feel every second tick by. She stood there in last night's party dress. Hair still curled. Smudged eyeliner. No jacket. "Why the hell is my key not working?" she snapped, voice still hoarse from whatever fun she had. "You don't live here anymore," I said flatly. She blinked. Thought I was joking. Smiled like I'd made a dumb prank. But I wasn't joking. I handed her an envelope. Thick. Heavy. Inside was a printed list. Itemized. Organized. Highlighted. What I took with me. What I left. What was legally joint property, none of which I moved. And most importantly, the signed divorce petition. Her mouth moved, but nothing came out at first. Then she laughed. Like I was insane. Like this was all an overreaction to a harmless little night out. "Are you serious?" "I went to a party. I didn't do anything. But I didn't care anymore." "You didn't have to," I said. "You just had to want to." She stepped forward. Tried to get in. I didn't move. "I didn't cheat on you, Emmett," she said, now serious, maybe even scared. I nodded. Good. Then this will be easier for both of us. She looked past me into the house. I saw her face change when she realized how empty it looked. No photos on the mantel. No keys in the bowl. No worn sneakers by the door. Just the echo of her own voice bouncing back at her. Then her tone changed. Can we talk? She asked, suddenly softer. Please? I looked her right in the eyes and said the most honest sentence I'd ever spoken. You went to remind me that you had options. I'm just showing you that I do too. And then I shut the door. But I didn't walk away. I waited. Because I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The first call came 10 minutes after I closed the door. Then another. Then another. Each one louder, angrier, more desperate. I turned my phone face down on the counter, but it still buzzed against the granite like a heartbeat I didn't want to feel. I thought ignoring her would be easy. I'd fantasized about silence so many times during our fights, but now that it was real, it didn't feel like peace. It felt like standing in the wreckage of your own home, wondering if maybe you were the one who lit the match. By noon, she'd switched from calls to texts. Long ones. Apologies wrapped in sarcasm. You're seriously doing this because I went to a stupid party? Followed by, I didn't even stay with him, Emmett. I slept on the couch. And finally, you don't throw away a marriage over a misunderstanding. Every line felt like a negotiation she assumed she'd already won. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I knew if I started, I wouldn't stop. I'd spiral. I'd try to explain the 1,000 tiny cuts that came before that party. The way she stopped laughing at my jokes. How she rolled her eyes when I talked about my day. How every conversation turned into a courtroom cross-examination. She wouldn't hear it. She never did. Around 3 p.m., I decided to go back to the house, not to talk to her, but to finish what I started. There were a few things I hadn't packed yet. The router, a box of old journals, and a photo album from our first year together that I'd hidden in the hallway closet. I parked down the street just in case she came back. I don't know why I was nervous. It was still technically my home. But the moment I saw her car parked crooked in the driveway, my stomach dropped. She was inside. Of course she was. When I walked up the porch, the door was open. Just slightly. I could hear the soft sound of her voice. Not crying, talking. I stepped closer, and then I heard a man's laugh. Deep, casual, confident. My brain didn't want to connect the dots, but it did anyway. I pushed the door open fully, and there he was, Josh, standing in my living room holding one of my mugs like he owned the place. Darcy was beside him, her arms crossed, eyes wide like she'd been caught stealing, but still ready to argue why it wasn't really theft. What are you doing here? She demanded. What am I doing here? I repeated slowly. This is my house. What are you doing here? Josh stepped forward, all calm composure. Hey, man, let's not make this weird. She just needed a ride to grab some of her stuff. I stared at him, and for a moment, I almost laughed. Because it wasn't even about the betrayal anymore. It was about the absurdity of it. The lemon cake. The party. The smug smirk on this guy's face like he'd won something he didn't even understand. Darcy tried to say something, but I cut her off. You brought him here? I asked, voice trembling but not loud. To our house. I didn't think you'd be here, she said quickly. I just wanted to explain. I held up a hand. You already did. And then I walked past them both. Calm. Too calm. I grabbed the last box from the closet, the journals, and the photo album. She followed me to the door, begging for me to talk, her words spilling over themselves. Explanations, half-truths, emotional debris. Josh just stood there, pretending not to be part of the disaster. When I reached the porch, I turned around one last time. You wanted to remind me that you had options, I said. Now you've got one standing right there. Congratulations. Her face went pale. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. I closed the car door before she could recover, and as I drove away, I caught a glimpse of her in the rearview mirror, barefoot, shaking, realizing, maybe for the first time, that this wasn't a fight she could charm her way out of. That was the last time I saw her in that house. But it wasn't the last time she tried to reach me. Not even close. 3 days. That's how long it took for the silence to crack. At first, I thought she'd move on the way she claimed she would. I don't need you to be happy, she once told me after an argument about something stupid, laundry or groceries, or maybe the fact that she forgot our anniversary and called me too sensitive when I brought it up. But now, she was the one who couldn't let go. The texts turned frantic. Paragraphs at a time. She didn't even pretend to be calm anymore. "You don't understand what that night meant," she wrote. "It wasn't about him. It was about us. I was trying to get your attention." "You got it, Darcy." She called my mother. Then she called my boss. Let me repeat that. She called my boss. Told him I was going through something personal and might need time off, as if she was still entitled to manage my life. I was sitting at my desk when he walked over, awkwardly placed a hand on my shoulder, and said, "Anything you need, Emmett, take it." I stared at him, blinking, trying not to explode. Then she started showing up. At the gym, at the grocery store I go to after work, even the cafe where I get my miserable little decaf latte on Sundays. Once, she sat 2 tables away from me, just watching. No drink, no book, just there, like she expected me to break the silence first. I didn't, but I felt it breaking inside me. I started thinking, maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I should have talked it out, handled it differently. She was my wife. 5 years. Was I really ending it over a party? Over one night? Then I remembered the smirk on Josh's face, the sound of his laugh in my living room, the lemon cake, and I remembered that I'd spent years trying to get her to see me again. I tried being patient. I tried being romantic. I tried space, therapy, begging, and even silence. But the only time she cared, really cared, was when she realized I was willing to disappear. On Friday night, I got home from work and found a package sitting outside my new apartment door. No return label. No card. Inside was the old Mr. and Mrs. picture frame we got from her aunt as a wedding gift. She'd replaced the photo with one of her, alone, taken recently. Hair done. Makeup perfect. The kind of image people post when they want to say, "I'm fine," but are really screaming, "I'm spiraling." That night, she called me again. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. The second I picked up, I regretted it. She didn't say hello. She didn't ask if I was okay. She just whispered, "I made a mistake." I didn't speak. She continued, "Josh isn't what I thought. He told me I was using him. He said I never really got over you." I said nothing. "I thought you'd chase me," she finally admitted, her voice shaking. "I thought you'd fight for me like you always do." That's when I finally spoke. "I did fight. For years. You just never noticed." She sobbed. Full-on breakdown sobs. The kind you hear in movies when someone finally realizes the credits are rolling and they're not the main character anymore. "I don't know how to fix this," she said. And I told her the truth. "That's because you're not supposed to." I hung up. And this time, she was the one staring at a door that wouldn't open. It started with her sister, Lydia. A FaceTime call out of nowhere, and I never answer FaceTime calls. But I saw her name flash across my screen while I was eating dinner, and something in me, maybe some old sense of politeness, made me pick up. She didn't waste time. "Emmett, can we talk?" she asked, not even pretending to be casual. I barely knew Lydia. We'd seen each other at a couple of holidays, smiled across the table, exchanged meaningless pleasantries while carving turkey or passing mashed potatoes. She always seemed a little cold toward me, like she was waiting for something about me to confirm her low expectations. So when she called, I figured it wasn't just curiosity. It was strategy. "She's falling apart," she said bluntly. "I've never seen her like this." I chewed slowly, not replying. "She made mistakes," Lydia continued. "But this silence, it's cruel." Cruel? That word almost made me laugh. For years, Darcy had weaponized silence like a trained killer, going days without speaking if I said the wrong thing, making me sleep on the couch without saying why, answering my questions with raised eyebrows and scoffs. Now that I was finally quiet, finally disconnected, suddenly I was cruel? I set down my fork. "Lydia," I said, "do you know where she went the night of that party?" "She told me she stayed at a friend's place," she said carefully. "She stayed at Josh's," I said. "Overnight. With wine and music and a bunch of people I've never met." And when I told her it made me uncomfortable, she said, "You don't get to decide where I go." Silence. Then Lydia spoke again, softer. She told me she regretted it the moment she got there. Then she should have left the moment she felt that. I snapped. Instead, she stayed. And now I'm the one who's gone. Lydia didn't argue, didn't defend her. "She wants to fix things," she said. "She wanted to win," I corrected. "And she lost. That's why this hurts." We ended the call politely. No yelling, no drama, just the calm after a storm that never should have happened in the first place. But that wasn't the end of it. The next day, I got a letter in the mail. Not a text. Not a voicemail. A letter. Handwritten. From her father. I didn't even know he remembered my address. It was 4 pages long. Every sentence was careful, balanced, almost lawyerly. He didn't defend what she did. He didn't deny the damage. But he did ask me to consider whether I was truly done, whether I could imagine a future without her. He said things like, people mess up in moments they don't think will count, and sometimes the apology isn't perfect because the guilt is too loud. And I sat there reading his words, thinking about the night I changed the locks. The way my hands didn't shake. The way it didn't feel like revenge, just relief. It wasn't about punishing her. It was about rescuing myself. Later that week, I saw her again, by accident this time. I was walking out of a hardware store, holding a bucket of paint and some new tools for my apartment, when I looked up and saw her in the parking lot. She wasn't watching me. She didn't even notice me. She was standing by her car, holding her phone to her ear, crying. I should have turned around. But I watched, just for a moment. And that's when I saw her say something into the phone I couldn't hear, but I could read her lips. I think I ruined everything. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel pity. I felt nothing. And that scared me more than anything. Because love doesn't die with screaming matches and broken plates. It dies quietly, in the silence that follows too many second chances. It was a Tuesday evening when I received her email. Yes, email. Not a message, not a call. A formal, oddly polite email with the subject line, "One dinner." No expectations. I almost deleted it. But the words she used, they were unlike anything she'd ever written to me before. There was no guilt tripping, no emotional manipulation, no dramatic pleas. Just a quiet, unsettling tone that made it feel more like a letter to an old friend than a desperate wife trying to win her husband back. Emmett, I know you owe me nothing, but I'm asking for one dinner. Just to talk. No pressure, no drama. I've made peace with the fact that I may have broken something I can't fix. But I need to know if we can sit across from each other without hate. You pick the place. I'll come alone. If you delete this, I'll understand. Darcy, the part that hit me hardest? I need to know if we can sit across from each other without hate. She wasn't asking to start over. She was asking if I still saw her as human. I didn't respond right away. I let it sit in my inbox for 2 days. Read it over and over like a riddle. Could I do it? Could I sit across from her and not see Josh's smug face? Not hear her words echoing in my head? I need to remind you that I have options. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. I picked a place. A quiet, dim restaurant just outside of town that neither of us had ever been to, neutral ground. No memories. No ghosts. I replied with one line. Thursday, 7 p.m. Bramble and Oak. When I got there, she was already seated. She wore a simple navy blue dress. No makeup. No perfume. Her hair pulled back the way she used to wear it when we'd stay in and cook. She looked nervous. Almost smaller. Not physically. Just less inflated, like all the pride had deflated out of her. She stood when I approached, but I didn't hug her. We sat. We ordered. We didn't speak for nearly 10 minutes. Just stared at our menus and sipped water and tried not to drown in the silence. Finally, she broke it. I won't beg you, she said quietly. I nodded. Good. I just want to tell you what you never let me say. I looked at her then. Really looked. And I braced for the usual. Excuses, blame, deflection. But she surprised me. She didn't talk about Josh. She talked about me. She talked about how she started resenting my stability because it reminded her of everything she feared losing. Freedom, excitement, the version of herself she was before marriage made things predictable. She talked about how she tried to provoke reactions from me to feel something, anything, when her own emotions were tangled in restlessness she couldn't name. And yes, she admitted to manipulating moments just to see if I still cared. I wanted to know if I could still break your heart, she whispered. I blinked. The honesty stung more than any lie ever could. You did, I said. She looked away. But not the way you think, I continued. You didn't break it all at once. You cracked it little by little. Over years. With every comment, every eye roll, every time you made me feel boring for loving you the same way every day. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, she said. But if you have any piece of it left, even the smallest shard, I just want to know you're going to be okay. And for the first time in a long time, I told the truth. I already am. We didn't finish our food. We sat in silence, watching the candles flicker between us. When we walked out, I held the door open. She paused beside me on the sidewalk, then said something that will echo in my mind for the rest of my life. I didn't realize you were leaving until the moment I wanted to come home. Then she walked toward her car, and I walked to mine. Two people who once promised forever, now strangers under streetlights. No shouting, no tears, just the clean, aching finality of goodbye. 2 weeks passed. No calls, no letters, no surprise appearances in grocery store aisles or text messages disguised as accidental. I started to believe that dinner was the end. The final scene. Clean, respectful, closure without war. Maybe she meant it. Maybe she was letting go. Then I got a message from my landlord. "Hey Emmett, just a heads up. Your wife stopped by earlier. Said she needed to drop off something. I didn't let her in, of course, just thought you should know." My blood went cold. I hadn't told her where I was living. I hadn't updated my address on anything that wasn't official or private. The apartment was a temporary lease, a space to breathe, to think, to rebuild. She had gone out of her way to track it down. I drove home that night with a stomach full of rocks. I didn't know what I'd find, a note taped to my door, a box of photos, maybe nothing at all. But it was worse than I imagined. On my doorstep was a small planter. Inside it, the bonsai tree I'd taken with me, snapped in half. Right down the center. Torn, not cut. Violent. Like someone tried to break it, and then changed their mind halfway through. Next to it, a sticky note with just 2 words. Not enough. I stared at it for a long time, trying to decide if it was a threat, a confession, or a plea. And then something else caught my eye. Movement behind the fence across the street. A car, headlights off, idling. I couldn't see who was inside, but I didn't have to. I knew. I didn't go over. I didn't wave. I picked up the broken tree, walked inside, and locked the door. And then I called my attorney. Because something had shifted. This wasn't a woman trying to apologize anymore. This was a woman spiraling, slipping from remorse into obsession. The next day, I got confirmation. An email from an old college friend I hadn't spoken to in years. "Hey man, random question. Is everything okay with you and Darcy? She messaged me last night. Said you were in some kind of trouble and might need help. Just felt weird." She was reaching out to my people now. My past. My private life. I checked my socials. She'd unblocked me. Like 2 old photos. And the worst part? She'd changed her profile bio too. Some people only come home when you've already moved on. I knew what this was. A final performance. The victim act. The redemption arc. She was turning the story around before I could even write my ending. And maybe once, that would have worked. Maybe I would have rushed to her defense. Told everyone she was misunderstood. That I was just going through something. That it wasn't her fault. But this time, I didn't protect her story. I started telling mine. I wrote my truth down in a long, brutal, honest message. No slander, no insults, just reality. I sent it to the people she had contacted. I didn't beg for sides or sympathy. I just told the truth. I told them how she chipped away at me for years. How she said things like, "You don't excite me anymore," when she thought I couldn't hear. How she used my predictability as proof that I was weak. How she made me believe that loyalty was pathetic. And how one night, after planning it days in advance, she packed a lemon cake and an overnight bag and went to the one man she knew would break me. Because she thought I wouldn't leave. But I did. I had to. And now, standing in my kitchen holding a broken tree, I realized something even more painful than betrayal. She didn't miss me. She missed the version of herself she got to be when I was still around. And that version, the one who was loved, forgiven, chosen every day, was gone for good. 6 months later, I was standing in line at a hardware store, holding a box of screws and a can of matte white paint, when someone tapped me on the shoulder. "Emmett." I turned. It wasn't her. It was a woman I didn't recognize at first, until I realized she looked familiar because I'd seen her once before, in a group photo on Darcy's phone. Her old coworker. The one who used to make Darcy roll her eyes and whisper, "She's always so chipper it's exhausting." Her name was Sophie. We made small talk. She asked how I was, how things turned out with Darcy. I answered honestly, not bitter, not cold, just honest. Then, out of nowhere, she smiled and said, "I always thought you were the only real one in that whole circle." I laughed, a little stunned. She shrugged. "Just saying. Some people only know how to love when it's easy. You stayed through hard. That's rare." We exchanged numbers. I didn't expect anything to come of it. But something did. A coffee. Then another. Then long walks through quiet neighborhoods talking about things that didn't hurt. Favorite books, weird childhood fears, how the smell of tomato soup reminds us both of snow days. Sophie didn't ask for pieces of me I wasn't ready to give. She didn't expect fireworks or emotional CPR. She just showed up, consistently, kindly, without performance. One evening, we were sitting on a bench outside a used bookstore. It was cold. She had her hands in her sleeves, eyes closed, head tilted toward the sun like she was soaking in something I couldn't see. And she said, "You know what I think peace feels like?" I shook my head. She smiled. "It feels like not being scared when the phone rings." That's when I realized I hadn't thought about Darcy in weeks. Not really. Not with anger. Not with sadness. Just not at all. She existed now like a closed book on a high shelf. Read, understood, shelved. I still saw her posts sometimes. Inspirational quotes. Solo brunch photos. Comments about healing. I didn't like them. I didn't block her either. Some ghosts are better left in the open. Eventually, the divorce was finalized. No drama. No letters. No courtroom scenes. Just paperwork. And one final line in the final message she sent. "I hope you find someone who never makes you feel like you have to earn love." I already had, but not in someone else. In myself. I had finally stopped begging for crumbs at a table I built. And as I sat beside Sophie, watching the sun dip behind the library across the street, I realized something I wish I had known years ago. Love that requires pain to prove itself isn't love. It's power. And peace, real peace, doesn't come loud. It comes when the door stays closed. And you're okay with that.